guys could be here to share her special day. So what do we know about Patricia Beverly Ferrara Cannon? Did I miss anything there? She's known by many names. Pat, Paca, Patsy. Hi! She doesn't like that one. Mrs. Cannon, Mrs. C, daughter, sister, auntie, mom, grandma, grandmama, cousin, friend. We know she bleeds Dr. Blue. She never met a slot machine she didn't like. She loves to cruise. And she is certainly not shy. She never met a handsome man she didn't flirt with. She loves to laugh and to joke. And she loves Facebook. But what do we really know about her, you ask? Well, I'm going to tell you. And if I miss something, I'm sure she'll fill it in. And we're all family here, so anytime you want to stop and make a comment, feel free. Pat was born on August 27, 1938, in Wailuku, Maui, to Frank and Lottie Ferrara. She was the last of 9 kids, the baby of the family. They lived in a small house in a mill camp in the sugar mill that her dad worked in as an electrician. She was 4 years old when the bombing of Pearl Harbor happened. She remembered that after that there was a food shortage, so she had to walk because they didn't have a car to Union Station or to Union Hall to get food. At 5, she was selected to be a flower girl in her sister Rita's wedding. Soon after that, she would begin attending St. Anthony's Catholic School. She attended St. Anthony's for 12 years. And I'm sure she was a model student throughout that whole time.
Right.
Although she did admit to me that when they had to read aloud in class, she would count the paragraphs till she found out which paragraph she had to read. And if the paragraph was too long or the words were too hard, she'd raise her hands and ask the nuns could she go to the bathroom so she didn't have to read. Growing up, she was a tomboy. She said that there was only boys on her block, so if she wanted to go outside and play, she had to play with the boys. So she would play marbles, yo-yo, milk cats, and baseball. She would catch bumblebees and tie a string to them and use it as a kite. And she was always in jeans, starched, of course. There was an empty lot next door to her house that they called their yard. So her friend August made a high jump in the yard. And it was Pat was in charge of the yard, so they all had to ask her permission to play there. She would love to walk to the sugar mill to bring lunch to her dad, because her dad would give her strawberry milk and even sometimes a Pepsi. Because Pat was a Pepsi girl growing up. That's all she drank. And she always wore a Pepsi shirt. In true tomboy fashion in high school, she hitched a ride with her brother Jacob to the high school football game one Friday night. As Jacob was making a turn, Pat fell out of the car. So Jacob took her to the hospital. She got stitched up her ankle, and she went to the football game with crutches. That same brother Jacob, when he came out of the Army, came home and stayed with them for a few years. During that time, he had Cheryl. Over there. Which my mom helped take care of. But since Pat would soon relocate to California, they lost touch until almost 60 years later, where they found each other on Facebook. When Pat was in 11th grade, it became hard for her parents to afford Catholic school tuition. So she decided to drop out and join the service, but the nuns talked her out of it. And then the pastor helped them pay for tuition so she could graduate in 1958. And so soon after that, she started dating a boy. His name was James Santos. Am I not supposed to say it? We're all friends here. So you need to not tell me so many stories. I'm telling all you guys. So since there were no jobs on the island and to get away from her boyfriend, her mother decided to transplant her to California. So with her mom and dad accompanying her, away she went on her first plane ride, which took 10 hours, and landed in Oakland to stay with her sister Millie. She stayed there a while and then moved in with her other sister, Mary Jane, in Pacoima. At that time, Mary Jane had 5 kids, all of whom Pat babysat. Trish is one of them. How was she? She a good babysitter?
You know what? I adored her. I did.
You had to say that.
True. She was the only one that was honorier than I was.
She didn't have a job, so she decided to go to PBX school to become a switchboard operator. So for those of you too young to know what a PBX is, because you know I'm too young, I had to Google it. It's a big board, and when someone would call to a company and wanted to speak to someone, they went to an operator, and then the operator plugged the proper line into the proper plug on the board so you could talk to that person. So, when her training was complete, she moved to Santa Susana, along with her sister Mary Jane. She found a job in Van Nuys at Lane & Company, which was a ceramics company, and she worked there for 5 years. And I can tell you, till this day, we still have Lane & Company ceramic stuff everywhere. Pat eventually moved in with her co-worker, Frances, in North Hollywood. Another co-worker taught her to drive at night in a Vaughn's parking lot. Her and her friend Frances would go to clubs and parties and hang out with friends on weekends. I don't know if she wants me to say the rest of this either. At one party, Pat met a guy that she started dating. He soon proposed and gave her a ring. But soon after that, she found out he was married, so she gave the ring back. After a while, she moved into her own place in Van Nuys. It was during this time that she met Bruce. Bruce happened to be renting in a room in Gardena from Pat's cousin, Rosemary. Now, Rosemary was a matchmaker. So there was a birthday party planned for Pat's mom. So Rosemary asked Pat, could she bring this guy? There's this guy renting from her, and he's really, really nice, and he thinks they'll be a good match. And what did Pat say? You can bring him, but my date will be there, so I won't be spending any time with him. Well, the day of the party arrived, and Rosemary introduced Bruce as promised. She said hi to Bruce, then spent the rest of the time with her date. Then at the end of the party, she said goodbye to Bruce, probably never expecting to see him again. But Bruce had other plans. Bruce got her number from Rosemary and called her 3 days later and asked her if she would go out. And her response, if you want. So that next weekend, Bruce drove from Gardena to Van Nuys and took her to the drive-in. She didn't date that other guy anymore. Bruce would drive to Van Nuys every weekend to see her. One time, Bruce's uncle asked him, "Are you going to marry her?" And his response, "Heck no, that's too far to drive." Well, I guess he changed his mind. They dated for about a year. Then one night they decided to go to the drive-in with her sister Mary Jane and her nephew Bob. And what did you guys see? What happened to baby Jane? At intermission, when Mary Jane and Bob went to the snack shop, Bruce proposed. But he didn't have a ring, so I don't know how prepared he was. But did Pat say yes? No. She told him, "We have a problem. I'm Catholic and you're not, and I have to marry a Catholic." Because Bruce was a Lutheran. But Bruce promised to convert. And did you finally say yes after that? She finally said yes. And Bruce became Catholic as promised before they got married. They settled on a wedding date of October 5th, 1963, about 2 years from when they met. After that, they moved into an apartment in Van Nuys, where they had their first daughter, Tina, in April of 1967. About 4 short months later, they found out they were pregnant with me. So they decided it was time to buy a house. They decided they were going to look in Gardena since Bruce worked in Gardena. And they found this house. And they moved into this house in January of 1968. And 6 months later, I was born. And then they stopped having kids because, I mean, you can't improve on perfection, right? When Tina started first grade at Maria Regina around 1973, Pat worked as a volunteer in the first grade class. A couple of years later, she was promoted to the hot lunch program. After that, she moved to the front office as a receptionist. During that time, she became close to the nuns that were assigned to that church because they were from Hawaii. And can you imagine, she spent lots of time, weekends, summers, nights with the nuns. Can you imagine how happy my sister and I were to have to spend all of our non-school time with our teachers and our principal? What?
She said she's sorry that happened.
Well, I'm sorry, I lost my place.
You got scared by the teachers.
I know, I got all excited. There it is. After 36 years of dedicated service, she retired in 2009 at 70 years old. Over the years, Pat did a lot of things at Maria Regina. She'd work bingo, work carnivals, help with weddings, train altar servers, coordinate ushers for family mass, and be a Eucharistic minister, which she still does today. Her first grandchild, CJ, over there somewhere, was born in November of 1993. It was on this date that she began to spoil him. Her second grandchild, Cassidy, was born February 2003, and Pat's spoiling expanded to 2 grandchildren. Her third grandchild, Shane, was born June in 2005, and you got it, her spoiling tripled. Over the years, Pat has had her share with brushes with fame. In the early 60s, Pat and her roommate, when they were living in North Hollywood, would frequent the fabled Palomino Club. She would often talk to Red West, who was Elvis Presley's close friend. Elvis Presley would occasionally hang out at the club too, and she even had a conversation with Elvis at one time. In the early 90s, they filmed the movie Ed Wood here on the block, in the front yard. They used our block. One day I get a call from my mom, and she says, oh, well, of course you know, she had to be in the middle of all of it. She got to know everyone behind the scenes and everything. So I get a call from her, and she says, you know, they invited me to lunch, and I sat with this really nice guy, and we had a really good lunch. And I said, was it a worker? And she said, no, I think he's in the movie. And I said, well, do you know his name? And she said, he told me his name, but I don't remember. So the movie opens, we go see it. I tell her, point out the person who you had lunch with. And you know who she pointed out? Johnny Depp. So, but I think the celebrity that she loves the most is the picture she got to take in downtown Disney with George Clooney when he gave her a hug. Throughout the years, even into her retirement, Pat kept herself busy. She was on bowling teams, went to Dodger games, hit the casinos, caught movies, went on cruises, traveled, camping, music concerts, comedy concerts, attending plays, even though sometimes she didn't like to play. Would you like to tell us what you think of Book of Mormon? No. But I think her number one favorite thing to do now. Sorry. Look out there, everybody wave! Everybody wave! But I think her number one thing to do now is to be on Facebook to keep up with all of us. Because how many of you have gotten that 2-8? Uh-oh, did it go off?
You push the off button.
Did I? No? Hello? Technical malfunction. It's on. I didn't break it. I promise.
Well, you don't touch things.
I didn't break it. I can just yell. I have a little words. I have a big mouth. I can yell.
Sound like it.
Come on now.
Go ahead and yell. Testing. Try it. Try it.
So is this not? Do you need this back then?
It might have come out
You can't
up
do it.
here.
I can't hear you.
Okay, so maybe if I get a little closer. So in March of 2017, Pat spent some time in the hospital. She was diagnosed with congestive heart failure and COPD. The doctor said that if she had waited any longer, she probably wouldn't be with us today. And of course, in true Pat fashion, she had all the doctors and all the nurses laughing. And of course, she flirted with every cute male nurse that came through the door. But I'm glad to say in the last year and a half, she's feeling and doing much better. She said that she never thought she'd make it to 80. Well, Mom, you made it. You made it to 80. And we're all very grateful and fortunate that you did. We're all better people to have you in our lives. And may you stick around for another 80 years making us laugh.